My husband had just left for a month-long business trip, and I saw my chance to finally move his favorite cactus. It stood in a heavy pot, and I'd always thought it would look better in a different spot. But as I carried it, my foot caught on the rug, and the pot crashed to the floor, shattering. What I found inside changed my life forever. It's truly strange how random events can completely alter our paths, isn't it? Ordinary, almost insignificant little things suddenly turn everything upside down, and after that nothing is ever the same. For me, that turning point was just a cactus. That's where my story begins, on an early Saturday morning. The spring sun poured soft, golden light into our apartment. My husband, Brandon, had recently departed for a month-long business trip to Seattle. He worked for a large construction company, and these long absences were common. I'd grown accustomed to them, though I always missed him. With the house to myself, I decided it was the perfect time to rearrange some furniture. I'd been longing to refresh our living space, but Brandon was a traditionalist who preferred everything to stay exactly where it was. He was especially protective of his cactus collection, which he'd nurtured for years. A whole row of prickly plants in various shapes and sizes lined our bedroom windowsill. Brandon tended to them with a devotion he rarely showed toward me. Among this spiky crowd, one cactus always stood out, large, with thick leaves and long, sharp needles. Brandon called it the General. It had been in our home for about 3 years, and Brandon gave it special attention. Even before leaving on trips, he'd leave me detailed instructions for its care. His attachment to that thorny windowsill resident was peculiar, but I never dwelled on it. Everyone has their quirks, right? That morning, I decided to move the dresser that stood against the wall opposite our bed. For months, I'd imagined it by the window. Maybe if I moved it now, Brandon would appreciate the effort when he returned and wouldn't mind the change. I pulled the heavy oak dresser away from the wall and slowly dragged it across the room. It was much harder than I'd anticipated, the stubborn furniture resisting my every effort. Finally, breathless, I maneuvered it into its new spot, directly under the cactus-lined window. I stepped back to admire my handiwork. Yes, much better. The room felt more balanced. But then something bothered me. The cacti. Now they loomed directly above the dresser. Every time I opened a drawer, I'd risk bumping into those spiky plants. I needed to move them. But where? I scanned the room. No space on the living room windowsill. My violets already claimed it. The kitchen was equally crowded. After a moment's thought, I decided to temporarily place them on a shelf in the hallway. The light wouldn't be ideal, but it was just for a little while. When Brandon came back, we could decide together. Carefully, trying not to prick myself, I began moving the plants one by one. The smaller cacti fit easily in my hands, no problem. But when it was the General's turn, I hesitated. This cactus wasn't just the largest. It was also the sharpest, and its clay pot felt unusually heavy. I donned gardening gloves to protect my hands, then carefully lifted the pot from below. It was significantly heavier than I expected, as if filled with something much denser than soil. Slowly, avoiding any sudden movements, I carried the cactus across the room. Everything was fine until my eyes caught our wedding photo on the nightstand. Brandon and I, so happy and in love, gazing at each other with tenderness. That photo always filled me with a warm feeling, but lately it also carried a touch of sadness. Something had shifted between us after 6 years of marriage. The lightness and openness we once shared had faded. Lost in thought, staring at the photo, I didn't notice the edge of the rug. I stumbled. The pot slipped from my gloved hands and hit the floor with a dull crash. The clay shattered into large pieces. Soil spilled everywhere, and the poor General toppled over, losing a few of its sharp needles. Oh, Brandon was going to be furious. I could already picture his disapproving face, his sharp reproach, or worse, that cold silence that was always harder to bear than words. But there was no choice. I had to clean up the mess. I ran to the kitchen for a dustpan and brush, then returned and knelt on the floor to gather the soil. That's when I noticed something strange among the clumps of dirt. A small metal object gleamed in the morning sun. At first, I thought it was just some trash that had accidentally fallen into the pot. But when I picked it up, I realized it was a key. A small, neat key, like one for a mailbox or a small lockbox. What was a key doing in a cactus pot? I turned it over in my hands, puzzled. Maybe Brandon had dropped it there while repotting? But then, why hadn't he taken it out? I set the key aside and continued cleaning. Soon, my fingers brushed against something else, a small plastic bag, sealed tight and smeared with dirt. I carefully wiped it off and held it up to the light. Inside was a flash drive, plain black with no markings. What was this doing in the cactus pot? And why had Brandon hidden it there? Questions swirled in my head, but I had no answers. I placed the flash drive next to the key and kept digging through the soil, now more attentive than ever. My diligence paid off. At the very bottom of the pot, near the base, I found another object. A small metal box, just a bit larger than a matchbox. It was covered with a thin layer of rust, like it had been buried there for years. I turned it in my hands, searching for a lock. Sure enough, on one side was a tiny keyhole, perfectly matching the little key I'd found. My heart began to race. What kind of secret stash had my husband hidden in a cactus pot? What had he been keeping from me all these years? I looked from the small key to the box, a silent debate raging in my mind. Should I open it? On one hand, these were Brandon's personal things, and I had no right to go through them without his knowledge. On the other hand, why would he hide something in such a strange place? Clearly keeping it from me? We were never supposed to have secrets from each other. At least, that's what I thought until now. After a minute of hesitation, curiosity won. I slid the key into the lock and carefully turned it. The mechanism clicked, and the lid of the box lifted slightly. Holding my breath, I opened it all the way. Inside was a tightly rolled piece of thin, yellowed paper. I carefully pulled it out and unrolled it. It was an old photograph with bent corners showing a young woman holding a baby. I had never seen this woman before. She didn't resemble anyone from Brandon's family that I knew. She had long, dark hair, striking eyes, and a smile that carried a hint of sadness. Who was she? And why had Brandon hidden her photograph in such a secret place? Turning the photo over, I found a note on the back. The faded ink was hard to read, but I managed to make out 2 lines written in neat, feminine handwriting. Danielle and Mason, forever together. June 10th, 2009. Danielle. Who were Danielle and Mason? Was Mason the baby's name? But what did Brandon have to do with them? Why had he hidden this photo in a secret box? I carefully placed the picture back inside and picked up the flash drive. Now I was even more desperate to know what was on it. For that, I needed a computer. Leaving the broken pot and spilled soil on the bedroom floor, I hurried to the living room where our laptop was. My hands trembled slightly as I powered it on and slid the flash drive into the USB port. A window popped up on the screen, showing several folders with strange names, just numbers and letters. Nothing to hint at what was inside. I opened the first folder. Inside were PDF documents. I clicked on the first one, and an image of a scanned passport appeared on the screen. Not mine, not Brandon's. The passport was issued to a Mason Bachner. Date of birth, June 10th, 2009. The exact date written on the back of the photo. The next document was a birth certificate for Mason. Mother, Danielle Bachner. And then I froze when I read the name of the father, Brandon Muse. My husband. My vision darkened. The room swayed around me. How was this possible? Brandon had a child he had never told me about, and a woman. This Danielle. Who was she to him? I opened more documents, automatically, my fingers moving on their own. A marriage certificate between Brandon Muse and Danielle Bachner, dated May 15th, 2009. A deed for an apartment in both their names. An insurance policy covering all three of them, Brandon, Danielle, and their son Mason. It felt like a physical punch to the stomach. Brandon married with another family, a child. How could that be? We had been married for 6 years. I feverishly compared the dates. His marriage to Danielle was in May 2009. Our wedding was in September 2017, which meant that at the time of our wedding, he was already married. So all these years, what was I? A mistress? A second wife? Someone with no official place in his life? My head spun with the flood of information and emotions. But I forced myself to keep going through the flash drive. The next folder contained photos, dozens, hundreds of them. In every one there was Danielle, sometimes alone, sometimes with the child, sometimes with Brandon. There they were, the three of them on a beach, celebrating a birthday, at a school Christmas pageant, proudly filming their son's performance. Just ordinary family photos, the kind Brandon and I had too. But in these, it wasn't me beside him, it was another woman. I didn't know what to think. How had Brandon managed to live a double life? How had he divided his time between two families? And most of all, why? In the third folder, I found videos. I played the first one, and Brandon's face filled the screen. He looked straight into the camera, his eyes cautious. "If you're watching this, Danielle, then something didn't go as planned," he began. "I want you to know I love you and Mason more than anything in this world. Everything I do for you. If something happens to me, the box has all the documents you'll need. Bank accounts, property, insurance. Everything is in your and Mason's name. You'll be safe. I promise." The video ended, but I kept staring at the screen, stunned. Loves them more than anything. But what about me? Where did I fit in his world? I clicked on more videos. Some showed family moments, Mason's birthdays, trips, evenings at home. Others showed Brandon talking again, addressing the camera, speaking about business, about potential danger, about being careful. He spoke nervously, hinting at things he didn't dare say directly. At the end of the folder, I found a video dated just last month. Only a few weeks ago, Brandon was in what looked like a hotel room. "Danielle, I'll be staying in Chicago a couple more days," he said. "Things aren't going as smoothly as I hoped. Give Mason a kiss for me. Tell him Dad will be home soon." Chicago. But Brandon had told me he was going to Denver for a partner meeting. He had lied. After everything I had just seen, that lie seemed like nothing. I closed the video and leaned back in the chair. My mind was chaos. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that the man I had lived with for 6 years, trusted, loved, had been living a double life. A husband to 2 women, a father to a child I never even knew existed. How was this possible? How had he divided his time between us? I tried to remember how often Brandon was gone. Business trips. He was always traveling. Sometimes just a few days, sometimes a week, sometimes a month. I had never questioned the need for those trips. His job required travel, and I accepted it. But now it turned out those trips, or at least some of them, were really time spent with his other family. The thought was so wild, so unbelievable that I couldn't process it. I reopened the folder with the documents and went through them carefully one by one. Maybe I had misunderstood something. Maybe there was another explanation. But the more I read, the clearer it became. Brandon had another family, and I had never known. Among the documents, I found a rental agreement for an apartment in New York. It had been leased under the name of Danielle Bachner, long before Brandon and I got married. Judging by the renewal dates, she was still living there. In New York, just 3 hours from our city. A knot formed in my throat. I needed fresh air. I shut down the computer, pulled out the flash drive, and walked over to the window. Throwing it open wide, I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to react to all of this? My first impulse was to call Brandon right away and demand an explanation, but I held back. In this state, I wouldn't be able to have a rational conversation. Maybe it would be better to figure out as much as I could on my own before confronting him. I glanced at the clock. Almost noon. I had spent hours on the computer without even noticing. My stomach growled. reminding me I hadn't eaten breakfast, but the thought of food made me sick. How could I think about eating when my life had just shattered into 1,000 pieces? Like that damned cactus pot. The pot. I had completely forgotten about it. The soil was still scattered all over the bedroom floor. The poor cactus lay on its side. I should have cleaned it up, but I had no strength left. Instead, I went back to the computer and reinserted the flash drive. This time, I decided to go through everything carefully, every file, every document, to piece together the full picture. Among the files, I found bank statements. The accounts were in Danielle Bachner's name, but the deposits came regularly from Brandon's card. The sums were substantial, almost the same as what he brought home each month as his salary. So all these years he had been dividing his income between two families, and yet he always told me he didn't earn as much as he wanted. We saved, we cut back, we sacrificed things for the future. But in reality, he was giving half of his income to another woman and child. I tried to remember the first time I noticed something strange about Brandon's behavior, but nothing truly alarming came to mind. He had always been a caring husband, calling me during trips, bringing back gifts, asking about my day. Yes, lately he had been more withdrawn, sometimes distracted, but I blamed it on stress at work. How blind I was. How did I not see the signs? Looking back now, I could recall countless little things that should have alarmed me. His odd phone calls, which he preferred to make outside or from the car rather than at home. His sudden changes in travel schedules. Sometimes he came back early. Sometimes he stayed longer without much explanation. And his reluctance to have children, even though we used to talk about it as something natural. A child. Brandon already had a child, a son who must be around 14 now. A teenager. All this time, I thought we were waiting because of money, because we wanted to be more stable first. The thought brought fresh tears to my eyes. I felt betrayed, used, cast aside from his real life. Who was I to him all these years? A distraction? A backup plan? Or just a convenient cover for whatever dark dealings he was hiding? I remembered that strange video where Brandon spoke of danger, of needing to be careful. Could his double life be tied to something illegal? Maybe he was involved in shady business work. Brandon always said he worked at a construction company handling materials and negotiations. But was that even true? I had never been to his office, never met his colleagues. He kept his work life completely separate from our home life. I decided to check. There had to be something on the flash drive. And there was. In one of the folders, I found contracts, agreements, business correspondence. But the company named in those documents wasn't the one Brandon had told me he worked for. And the field wasn't construction. It was logistics, international shipping. The deeper I dug, the more confused I became. Some contracts were in foreign languages, with companies from countries I knew little about. The sums listed were so large I doubted they could be legal. How could a modest supply manager have access to that kind of money? In one of the last folders, I found something that completely floored me. Scans of passports, not just one, but several, all issued to Brandon, but under different last names. Muse, Bachner, White, Voigt. Why would one man need multiple passports with different names? The answer was obvious, but I was too afraid to even put it into words. By the time I tore myself away from the computer, it was already getting dark outside. My head buzzed from the overload of information. My eyes burned from staring at the screen. I felt empty, drained, and yet deep inside, a new determination was forming. I had to find out the whole truth, no matter how bitter it was. The first thing I needed to do was find out if Danielle and her son Mason actually existed or if this was some elaborate fabrication. Photos and videos could be faked. Documents forged. I needed undeniable proof. I grabbed my phone and opened social media. If this woman was real, she had to have accounts, photos, friends. I typed in Danielle Bachner and got dozens of results. Too many to go through one by one. I had to narrow it down. I went back to the flash drive and found Danielle's date of birth. February 27, 1985. She was 3 years older than me. I added that to the search, and the list of results shrank. Now, I just had to compare the photos to the one I had found in the box. After a few minutes of scrolling, I found her. The profile was private with minimal personal information, but the main photo left no doubt it was her. The dark hair, the striking eyes, the sad smile. Only now she looked older than in the box photo, which made perfect sense. Scrolling through the few posts visible without being friends, I saw photos of a teenage boy, and he looked shockingly like Brandon. The same eyes, the same mouth, even the same way of smiling. Those dimples at the corners of his lips, the ones I loved so much in my husband, were right there on his son's face. There was no doubt left. Danielle and Mason were real. They weren't some figment of a twisted imagination. And judging by everything I'd seen, they truly were Brandon's family, his real family. I scrolled through Danielle's posts and came across one from just last week. The photo showed a table set for a celebration with a birthday cake. The caption read, "Happy birthday to my beloved husband. May all your dreams come true." Brandon's birthday had been last week. He'd spent it on a business trip, or rather, as I now understood, with his other family. Bitterness and rage washed over me in a new wave. I threw my phone onto the couch and burst into tears. Loud, uncontrollable sobs, the kind I hadn't cried in years. All the tension, the shock of discovery, the pain of betrayal, it all poured out of me. I don't know how long I sat there, letting it out. Maybe a few minutes, maybe an hour. When I finally calmed down, it was already dark outside. I felt empty, drained, but also strangely lighter, as if I had cried out not only the pain, but also part of my old self, the naive, trusting woman who had blindly believed her husband. Wiping away my tears, I picked up my phone again. I needed to know more about this Danielle. Who was she? What did she do? How long had she known Brandon? Even with her profile mostly private, I managed to find a few details. Her workplace, a company called Eastern Transport. From the name, it was clearly tied to transport or logistics, the very field Brandon's documents showed he was actually working in. A handful of friends, shared interests, nothing unusual, nothing that explained why Brandon was living a double life. I thought about it. If Danielle really believed she was Brandon's legal wife, then she probably didn't know about me. Or maybe she did. Maybe she was just as much a victim as I was. I had to talk to her face to face. But how? I couldn't just send a message saying, "Hello, I'm your husband's wife. Let's meet and discuss this mess." That sounded like the start of some bad soap opera. But I needed answers, and Danielle seemed to be the only person besides Brandon who could give them to me. I went back to the flash drive and found the address of the apartment Danielle rented. New York, Madison Avenue, Building 2847, Apartment 15B. I wrote it down, trying to decide what to do next. Go to New York right now? It sounded crazy, but sitting around waiting for Brandon to come home, pretending nothing had happened, felt even crazier. And I had no idea when he'd actually come back. He had said his trip would last a month, but now I couldn't trust a single word of his. The decision came naturally. I was going to New York tomorrow. I would find Danielle and talk to her. Maybe she knew more than I did. Maybe she was another victim of Brandon's lies. Or maybe she was his partner in whatever shady business he was hiding. Either way, I had to know the truth. Once I made the decision, I felt strangely relieved. At least now I had a plan, something solid to hold on to in all this chaos. I got up from the couch and went to the kitchen. Appetite or not, I had to eat. The day had been brutal, and tomorrow would be even harder. I would need my strength. Opening the fridge, I mechanically pulled out some food and started cooking a simple dinner. My hands moved on autopilot, performing the familiar motions, while my thoughts circled back to the secret I had uncovered. How had Brandon managed this double life? How had he lied to both of us without raising suspicion? And more importantly, why? Why would he need 2 families, 2 homes, 2 lives? The financial part also haunted me. Supporting 2 families wasn't cheap. Where was Brandon getting the money? His so-called job in logistics couldn't possibly pay that much. Maybe he really was involved in something illegal. I remembered his strange video message to Danielle, the one where he spoke about danger, about being careful. Could he be tied to the criminal world? Was this double life part of some bigger scheme? But what kind of scheme? The questions kept multiplying and I had no answers. I knew that without talking to Brandon or Danielle, I'd never get them. But waiting for my husband was not an option. Too many lies, too many secrets. I had to act now. After dinner, I started getting ready for the trip. The bus to New York left early in the morning, and I could buy a ticket online. I packed a small bag with essentials, not knowing how long I'd be staying. Then I checked my bank account. There was enough money for the trip and a few days in a hotel. Finally, I went to tidy up the bedroom. I gathered the pieces of the broken pot, swept up the spilled soil, and placed the cactus in a new pot. The plant looked a bit damaged but still alive. Funny how something as small as a broken pot had triggered such massive changes in my life. Once the room was in order, I took a shower and went to bed. But despite the exhaustion, sleep didn't come. I tossed and turned, replaying the day in my head, trying to grasp the reality that my so-called happy life had been built on lies. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, I finally drifted into a restless sleep, full of strange, uneasy dreams. I dreamed of Brandon, but with a different face. He spoke to me, but his words were foreign, impossible to understand. And always nearby was Danielle, holding the child, watching me with that same sad smile. The sound of my alarm woke me at 6 o'clock. My head felt heavy from the sleepless night, but my determination was intact. I got ready quickly, called a taxi, and headed to the bus station. The bus to New York left at 7:30. I took a seat by the window and braced myself for the 3-hour trip. The city outskirts blurred into fields and forests outside the glass, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were fixed on the meeting ahead. What would I say to her? How would I explain why I was there? And most of all, how would she react when she found out her husband was also married to someone else? I imagined myself in her place. How would I react if a strange woman showed up at my door claiming she was my husband's wife? I probably wouldn't believe her. I'd think it was some kind of stupid joke or mistake. I needed proof, something to convince Danielle that what I said was true. I took out my phone and scrolled through my photos with Brandon. Our wedding picture, standing under a flower arch, happy and in love. Our honeymoon in Italy. Last Christmas, Brandon in a silly Santa hat with his arm around me. These photos had to be enough to show Danielle I wasn't some crazy fantasist. But was it enough? Maybe I should bring our marriage certificate. It was at home in the drawer with our documents. No, I decided the photos would be enough. And besides, I had the flash drive with all the documents I'd found in the cactus pot. If necessary, I could show those to Danielle too. The bus pulled into New York right on schedule, 10:25 a.m. I stepped out into the noisy terminal and was immediately swallowed by the chaos of the huge city. I'd never been to a metropolis this big before, and under other circumstances, I might have been impressed by its scale and energy, but now it wasn't the time. I was focused only on my goal. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address. Madison Avenue, building 2847. He nodded and drove me across the city. The trip took about an hour with traffic, and the whole time I tried to gather my thoughts, to prepare for the conversation ahead. But the closer we got, the more nervous I became. What if she wasn't home? What if her son, Mason, opened the door? What would I say to him? Or worse, what if Brandon was there? Maybe he wasn't on a business trip at all, but here with his other family. The thought made me break into a sweat. I pictured opening the door and seeing Brandon sitting at the table with Danielle and Mason. A perfect family scene with no place for me in it. How would I react? What would I even say? But it was too late to turn back. The taxi pulled up in front of the address, an elegant building on one of Manhattan's most prestigious streets. I paid the driver and stepped out. For a moment, I wanted to just turn around and leave forget everything, go back to my old life. But I knew there was no going back. Too much had changed in the last 24 hours. I took a deep breath, gathered my courage, and entered the building. Apartment 15B was on the 15th floor. I took the elevator up, my heart pounding harder with every second. Finally, I stood in front of the door. An ordinary door, nothing special, but behind it was my husband's other life. I raised my hand and pressed the doorbell firmly. Several long seconds passed. Nothing. No sound, no movement. I pressed again, more insistently. Still silence. It looked like nobody was home. I looked around helplessly, unsure what to do. Wait. But for how long? An hour? 2? All day? And what if no one came back? I didn't have another address where I could find Danielle. Just then, the door to the neighboring apartment opened, and an elderly woman peeked out, her eyes curious. "You looking for the Bachners?" she asked, giving me a sharp once-over. "Yes, for Danielle," I replied, trying to sound confident. "They're not home," the neighbor said. "Went to their country house for the weekend. Won't be back until Monday." It was Saturday. That meant I'd have to wait 2 days. "And who are you to them?" the woman pressed. For a moment I froze. Who was I to them? Nobody. A stranger meddling in their lives. But, of course, I couldn't tell her the truth. "I'm Danielle's colleague," I improvised quickly. "I need to give her some important documents. Do you happen to know where their country house is?" The woman squinted, clearly skeptical. But then she seemed to decide there was nothing suspicious about my question. "Somewhere in the Hamptons, I think," she said. "Can't say for sure. I never asked. But if you want, I can give you her cell. I keep it for emergencies." "That would be perfect," I said gratefully. She disappeared into her apartment and came back a minute later with a slip of paper. "Here you go," she said, handing it to me. "I hope it's nothing urgent." "No, nothing that can't wait until Monday," I assured her. "Thank you for your help." The woman nodded and closed her door, leaving me in the hallway with the paper in my hand. Now I had a way to reach Danielle directly. But should I call her? What would I even say over the phone? News like this wasn't something you broke from a distance. I went downstairs and stepped outside. The day was warm and sunny, a typical summer day. People hurried about. Cars roared past. Children played somewhere nearby. Ordinary life, so painfully at odds with the chaos in my soul. I found a cafe nearby and went inside to grab something to eat and think about my next move. After ordering a salad and tea, I pulled out my phone and looked at the number written on the slip of paper. Call or not call? I could just say I was calling about work and introduce myself as her colleague, like I had told the neighbor. Then, during the conversation, maybe I could find out where exactly their country house was and go there. But wouldn't that sound strange, suspicious? As I debated with myself, my food arrived. I chewed the salad mechanically, barely tasting it, while weighing all the pros and cons. The decision came to me suddenly. I would call Brandon right now, tell him I knew about his second family, and demand an explanation. After all, he was the one at the center of this mess, so why not start with him? I dialed my husband's number, bracing myself for a hard conversation. But after a few rings, his voicemail picked up. Brandon was unreachable. Maybe he was in a meeting on the subway or just ignoring my calls. Either way, that path was a dead end. I went back to my original plan. I had to find a way to meet Danielle face to face. And if that meant going all the way to her country house in the Hamptons, then so be it. I pulled up the map on my phone and checked where the Hamptons were. About 2 hours from Manhattan, not too far. But the problem was I didn't have an exact address. The Hamptons wasn't exactly a precise location. I looked again at the phone number I had been given. Maybe I should just call. What did I have to lose? Heart pounding, I dialed. It beat so loudly, I was sure everyone in the cafe could hear it. After a few rings, a woman's voice answered. "Hello." It was the same voice I'd heard on the videos from the flash drive. The voice of the woman who had been my husband's wife much longer than I had. "Hello, Danielle," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "Yes, this is she replied. "Who's speaking?" I hesitated for a moment. How should I introduce myself? On what pretense could I arrange a meeting? "My name is Amanda," I said, deciding not to use my real name. "I need to meet with you. It's about Brandon." There was silence on the other end. Then Danielle cautiously asked, "Brandon? Are you his colleague?" "Not exactly," I said vaguely. "It's personal. Very important. I'd rather discuss it in person, not over the phone." Another pause. I could almost feel her suspicion through the line. "I'm not sure I understand," she finally said. "And I'm not in New York right now." "I know. You're at the country house," I said. "Your neighbor told me you were in the Hamptons. I could come if you give me the exact address." "You were at my apartment." Her voice sharpened with alarm. "Who are you? What do you want?" I knew I was scaring her, but I didn't see another way to get a meeting. "Please don't be afraid," I tried to reassure her. "I won't hurt you. I just need to talk to you about Brandon, about your husband." I put extra weight on the last words, hoping they would make her stop and think. Silence followed again, longer this time. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight. "How do you know Brandon?" I took a deep breath. The moment of truth. Should I tell her now, or wait until we met? "I'm his wife," I said simply. "We've been married for 6 years." A strange sound came from the other end, like a muffled gasp. Then the line went dead. Danielle had hung up. I sat staring at my phone, not knowing what to do next. Call again? But what would I say? She was clearly shocked, maybe didn't believe me, and likely wouldn't want to continue the conversation. But I needed to see her. I had to know the truth. The whole truth about Brandon, his double life, his secrets. I tried calling again, but this time her phone was switched off or out of service. She didn't want to talk anymore. Fine. Then I'd go to the Hamptons and look for her house. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but I had no other choice. After paying for my meal, I left the cafe and headed toward the bus station. I had to catch a bus going to the Hamptons. On the ride, my mind kept circling the same questions. What if Danielle really didn't know about me? What if the news of her husband's second wife had been just as much of a shock to her as her existence had been to me? Maybe that was why she hung up, out of pure disbelief. But then again, what if she did know? What if she had been fully aware of Brandon's double life and was part of it all along? What if they had been deceiving me together, side by side, all these years? The thought made anger rise inside me. How could they? How could Brandon do this to me? To her? Did he actually enjoy living a lie, tricking two women, playing two roles? The bus finally stopped in the center of the Hamptons, and I stepped off. Now came the hardest part. Finding Danielle's house in a whole region full of sprawling estates. I walked over to an information board, hoping for a map of the area. There was one. The houses were scattered all around like stars in the sky. Dozens, maybe hundreds of properties spread out across neighborhoods with fancy names. Ocean View, Pine Hills, Golden Shore. How was I supposed to find hers? I had no idea, but I wasn't about to give up. I pulled out my phone and dialed Danielle's number again. To my surprise, she answered almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "I want to meet with you," she said without preamble. "In 1 hour, at the Ocean Breeze Cafe on the edge of Hampton Beach. Do you know it?" I told her I'd find it with GPS good, she continued, her voice still tense. "And come alone. No witnesses, no police. This is between us." "Of course," I assured her. "I'll come alone." The call ended, and I stood there on the sidewalk, phone in hand, hardly believing my luck. Danielle herself had agreed to meet me. She had set the time and place. That meant she wanted answers, as badly as I did. I found the cafe on the GPS. It was about a mile from the bus stop. I could walk or take a cab. I chose the cab. I couldn't risk being late. The taxi pulled up to the cafe exactly 45 minutes after my call with Danielle. I still had 15 minutes to spare. I paid the driver and stepped out. The Ocean Breeze Cafe was a small wooden building overlooking the ocean. A few cars sat in the parking lot nearby. The place was quiet, secluded, perfect for the kind of conversation Danielle and I were about to have. I walked inside and looked around. Only a handful of people were there. An elderly couple by the window, a group of young people at a big table in the corner, and a lone woman sitting in the back. I recognized her instantly, even though I had only seen her in photos. Danielle. She noticed me, too, and gave a slight nod, motioning for me to come over. I headed to her table, my heart pounding. Here she was, the woman who had been my husband's wife far longer than I had, the woman who had given him a son, the woman whose existence had completely upended my life. Up close, she looked older than in the photos. Dark hair streaked with gray, tired eyes, fine lines at the corners of her mouth, but still beautiful, with a quiet, restrained elegance. "Hello," I said as I reached her table. "I'm Amanda. We spoke on the phone." She studied me for a moment, as if weighing me, then gestured for me to sit. "You said you're Brandon's wife," she said after a pause. "Is that true?" I nodded and pulled my passport from my bag, showing her the page with my marriage record. "My real name is Sharon," I said. "Sharon Muse, his wife. Here, look." Danielle took the passport, examined my details carefully, then flipped to the marriage page. Her face stayed composed, but I noticed her knuckles turn white around the document. 6 years, she said quietly. "You've been married 6 years?" "Yes," I confirmed. "And you and Brandon, how long?" 16, she replied, handing the passport back. "We married in 2009 before Mason was born." 16 years. That meant by the time Brandon and I got married, he had already been with Danielle for a decade. 10 years of another home, another family, another life. "So, you didn't know about me?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. Danielle shook her head. "Of course not. Do you think I would have let my husband marry another woman? That's insane." Her voice carried bitterness, but not anger. At least, not directed at me. "How did you find out?" she asked after a pause. I told her everything. The cactus, the broken pot, the flash drive, the little box. With each word, her face grew tighter. "That cactus," she said when I finished, "he always had it. For as long as I can remember, Brandon never parted with it. He even took it on trips. I always wondered about that strange attachment to a plant, but I chalked it up to his quirks." "And the flash drive," she asked. "What did you find there?" I told her about the documents, the photos, the videos, how Brandon spoke to her and Mason, talking about some danger, urging caution. At the mention of the videos, Danielle flinched. "I never saw those recordings," she said. "He never showed them to me. Never told me he'd made anything like that." "That's strange," I agreed. "Why record messages if you're never going to give them to the person they're meant for?" Danielle tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "He was always secretive," she said at last. "Even with me, especially in recent years. All those business trips, late returns, odd phone calls. I suspected he was seeing someone else. But I thought it was just an affair. I never imagined an entire second life." Her voice was filled with such bitterness that I genuinely felt sorry for her. She seemed as much a victim of Brandon's lies as I was. "And what about his work?" I asked. "What do you know about it?" "He works for a logistics company," Danielle said. "Eastern transport, international shipping, constant trips, meetings with partners. I got used to him being gone all the time." "And he told me," I said, "that he worked in construction, supplying materials, dealing with contractors." We looked at each other, and in that moment, something like an unspoken understanding formed between us. Two women, both deceived by the same man, suddenly found themselves allies. "So he lied to both of us," Danielle said. "The question is why? Why 2 families, 2 lives? What was the point?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but I don't think it was just that. From what I saw in those videos, he was afraid of something. He talked about danger, about being careful. Maybe he's into something illegal. Danielle's expression turned thoughtful. Maybe, she said at last. He has been more nervous lately, always checking if someone was following him, forbidding Mason and me from posting photos online. And once I saw him hiding a package in the garage under the floorboards. When I asked what it was, he brushed me off, said it was just old documents that might come in handy someday. We both sat in silence, lost in our own thoughts. The situation was only getting more tangled. Who was Brandon, really? What did he actually do? And most of all, where was he now? Where is Brandon supposed to be right now? I asked. Danielle shrugged. On a business trip in Chicago. He's supposed to be back in 2 weeks. He told me he was going to Seattle for a month, I said. So, basically, he could be anywhere, or with a third family we don't even know about. Danielle shook her head. No, not that. 2 families are already complicated enough to manage. 3? That's beyond possible, even for a master liar like Brandon. I had to agree. A double life was already a huge balancing act. A triple one seemed impossible. There's something else, I said after a pause. On the flash drive, I found scans of several passports, all in Brandon's name, but with different last names. Muse, Bachner, White, Voigt. Danielle flinched. Bachner, that's my last name. Brandon took it when we got married. But in my marriage, he's Muse too, I said. We locked eyes, and I saw the same realization in her that I had just reached. Fake documents, she said quietly. He uses different names in different situations, like a spy in a movie. Or a criminal. I nodded. It explained a lot, and at the same time nothing. Why would an ordinary man need fake documents? What was our husband really involved in? And where was he right now? Was he truly on a business trip, like he told both of us? Or somewhere else, under another name, doing something neither Danielle nor I could even imagine? The questions piled up, but the answers never came. We had been sitting in the cafe for over an hour. We'd already ordered and finished our tea, but the conversation kept flowing. I told Danielle about my life with Brandon. She told me about hers. 2 parallel stories, 2 versions of the same man. Did you ever notice anything strange with him? I asked. Anything that made you suspicious? Danielle thought for a moment. There were calls, she said finally. Weird calls that left him jumpy and irritable. Sometimes in the middle of the night. He always said it was the time difference, business partners in other countries. But he would leave the room, lower his voice, and when I asked what it was about, he dodged the question or snapped at me. I had the same thing happen, I nodded. What else? Packages. He sometimes got packages with no return address. He never opened them in front of me, always took them into his office. When I asked what was inside, he said it was work material, technical documents, or samples. I nodded. We had those too. Once I accidentally opened one. I thought it was a book delivery I'd ordered. But inside were papers in a foreign language and a small box sealed with tape. Brandon was furious. He yelled at me. That was the only time he ever raised his voice. I remembered something similar in my own life with him. I had once grabbed his work bag by mistake instead of mine, and when I opened it, I found documents in a language that looked like Arabic. Brandon had snatched the bag from me, furious, and stayed gloomy the entire evening. We both came to the same conclusion. Our husband was clearly involved in something he didn't want anyone to know about. Something tied to international contacts, maybe even illegal operations. But what exactly? We had no idea. So what do we do now? I asked after a long silence. When he comes back, how do we handle this? Danielle shrugged. I don't know. I'm not even sure I want to see him again after all this. 16 years of marriage. And the whole time he's been living a double life, lying to me, cheating on me, maybe even putting Mason and me in danger with whatever shady business he's into. How could I ever trust him again? How could I stay his wife? I understood exactly how she felt. I was going through the same thing. 6 years of my life had been built on lies. Everything I thought I knew about my husband turned out to be fake, just a backdrop hiding another reality. But you have a son, I said. Mason, he needs his father. Danielle gave a bitter laugh. A father who lies and cheats? Who might be a criminal? No, Mason doesn't need that kind of role model. He needs someone honest, someone decent, someone worth looking up to. And Brandon is none of those things. I couldn't argue with her. After everything we'd uncovered, the image of Brandon as a loving, reliable family man had collapsed like a house of cards, and in its place stood someone else. Someone deceitful, two-faced, maybe even dangerous. And you? Danielle asked. What are you going to do? I lifted my shoulders in a helpless shrug. I don't know, but one thing's certain. I can't keep up this farce. I can't live with a man I now realize I never truly knew at all. We exchanged phone numbers, agreeing to keep each other updated, especially if Brandon suddenly showed up at one of our doors. Just as I was about to leave, Danielle grabbed my hand. Wait, she said. There's something else. You mentioned the little box you found in the cactus pot. What was inside besides the photo? Only the photo, I answered. Why? Was there supposed to be something else? Danielle frowned. In one of the videos you watched, Brandon said something about documents being in the box, bank accounts, property deeds, insurance, but you didn't find any of that. I shook my head. No, just the photo. Maybe he meant the documents on the flash drive. Maybe, Danielle said, though she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe the box has a false bottom. The thought had never crossed my mind. A hidden compartment like in spy movies. But given everything we'd discovered about Brandon, it didn't seem far-fetched at all. Do you have the box with you? Danielle asked. No, I said. I left it at home. I only brought the flash drive. She nodded slowly. I see. When you get back, check it carefully. There could be some hidden mechanism, a secret compartment. I promised I would. We said goodbye, hugging like old friends, even though we had only met a few hours earlier. Strange how shared misfortune can bring people closer together. On the bus ride back to New York, I replayed our conversation in my head. Danielle had seemed genuine, just as shocked and confused as I was. It looked like she truly hadn't known about me, just as I hadn't known about her. We were both victims of the same deception. Puppets in the hands of a master manipulator we thought was our husband. But who was Brandon, really? What lay behind all his masks? And most importantly, did he really have some dark past or present tied to illegal activity, like we both suspected? By the time I reached my hometown, it was late evening, around 10 p.m., when the bus pulled into the station. Exhausted, emotionally drained, but determined to uncover the truth, I decided to spend the night at a nearby hotel and return home in the morning. I still needed to inspect the box again, go through the flash drive one more time, maybe uncover new clues. And after that, then I'd have to decide what came next, how to rebuild my life after everything I had learned. The hotel was close to the station, small, cozy with friendly staff. I checked in, went up to my room, and collapsed onto the bed. It had been such a long, overwhelming day. But despite my exhaustion, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept circling around Brandon, his double life, his secrets. I decided to look through the flash drive again. Maybe I had missed something the first time, something that could help me piece together the puzzle. I opened my laptop, inserted the drive, and began going through the files one by one. I paid special attention to the videos where Brandon spoke to Danielle, warning her about danger, urging her to be careful. In one clip, dated last year, Brandon looked especially tense. He spoke quickly, nervously, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid someone might be listening. Danielle, he began, if you're watching this, it means something went wrong. It means I couldn't come back like I promised. The box has everything you need. Certificates, accounts, everything to make sure you and Mason are safe. If something happens to me, go to Lloyd. He knows what to do. And remember, I've only ever loved you and Mason. Everything I did for you. The video ended, leaving me staring at the screen. Brandon had talked about the box, about documents inside it. But in the box I found in the cactus pot, there was only a photo, no documents, no certificates, nothing that could protect Danielle and Mason. And who was this Lloyd? Brandon hadn't given a last name, no contact details. How was Danielle supposed to find him? And what exactly did Lloyd know that could help in case of danger? The questions piled up, but the answers didn't. I kept digging through the files, desperate for a clue, some kind of explanation. That's when I came across a strange file in the documents folder. It had no extension. It wouldn't open with any normal program. I almost skipped it until I noticed its name, Lloyd. The exact same name Brandon had mentioned in his video to Danielle. I tried opening it with different applications, but nothing worked. It seemed encrypted or password protected. That only fueled my curiosity. What secret was hidden in there? What was so important that Brandon locked it away? I remembered the scanned passports on a flash drive, all with different surnames. Maybe one of them belonged to this mysterious Lloyd. I opened the passport folder again and studied each document carefully. And there it was, one issued to a man named Lloyd White. But the photo was Brandon. So Lloyd wasn't some mysterious outsider. Lloyd was just another alias, another one of my husband's many identities. My head was spinning from all these revelations. Who was the man I'd lived with for 6 years? Just an ordinary manager? A master of living 2 lives? A criminal with multiple passports? Or someone else entirely? Someone I couldn't even imagine. It was well past midnight when I finally shut down the computer and crawled into bed. Exhaustion took over, and I fell into a deep, restless sleep almost immediately, full of strange visions and vague fears. I woke to the sound of a text message. Dawn was just breaking outside. I grabbed my phone and looked at the screen. The message was from Danielle. I'm in trouble. Someone broke into the country house. Mason and I are safe, but I'm scared to go back to New York. What if they come there, too? I called her right away, but her phone was out of service. I tried texting back, undelivered. What was happening? Who could have broken into the country house? And most importantly, was this connected to our conversation about Brandon? Not knowing what else to do, I decided to go back to the Hamptons, find Danielle's country house, and make sure she and Mason were okay. Maybe it was paranoia, but after everything I'd learned in the past 2 days, every odd detail felt like a potential threat. I packed quickly, checked out of the hotel, and rushed to the bus station. Luckily, the first bus to the Hamptons was leaving in just 30 minutes. I bought a ticket and sank into a seat on the half-empty bus. The ride felt endless. I couldn't sit still, my mind racing with worry. What if something had really happened to Danielle? What if all Brandon's warnings about danger weren't empty words, but a real threat? Finally, the bus arrived in the Hamptons. I headed straight to the taxi stand, planning to start from the Ocean Breeze Cafe where I'd met Danielle yesterday. From there, I could begin searching for her house. The cab driver, an older man with a kind face, listened carefully as I explained. Ocean Breeze, he asked. That's a bit far. And why go there so early? The cafe's still closed. I'm looking for a friend, I explained. She has a country house somewhere nearby, but I don't know the exact address. We agreed to meet at the cafe, but now she isn't answering my calls. The driver nodded thoughtfully. What's your friend's name? Maybe I know her. I've been driving these roads for 20 years. I know most of the locals. Danielle Bachner, I said, not expecting much. She has a son, Mason. To my surprise, his face lit up. Bachner. Of course, I know them. Good people. Their place is in Pine Hills, just past Ocean Breeze. Want me to take you there? I could hardly believe my luck. Could it really be this easy? Yes, please take me there, I said. The drive took about 20 minutes. We passed the closed Ocean Breeze Cafe, turned down a scenic road, and soon reached the gates of a well-kept neighborhood marked Pine Hills. The Bachner house is that one, the white one with blue shutters, the driver said, pulling over. But funny, I don't see their car. Maybe they already left. I paid him and stepped out. Sure enough, there was no car in the driveway. Maybe Danielle and Mason had already gone. Or maybe they hadn't come to the country house at all that weekend, and the message was a trick. But then why would Danielle text about a broken door? And why wasn't she answering my calls or messages? I walked up to the gate and pushed it gently. Unlocked. If Danielle was afraid for her safety, wouldn't she have locked everything tight? The yard was tidy, with neat garden beds and flower patches. The two-story house with its porch looked cozy and well-kept. But as soon as I reached the front door, my stomach dropped. The lock had been broken, the door hanging on one hinge. My heart pounded. Something really had happened. Someone really had forced their way in. But where were Danielle and Mason? I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Danielle. I called. Mason, are you here? Silence. The house felt empty. I walked through the hallway into the living room. Chaos. Furniture overturned. Drawers yanked out, their contents scattered across the floor. Someone had been searching for something quickly, carelessly. I climbed the stairs. The same destruction upstairs. Total mess. Things tossed everywhere. In one room, probably Mason's, school books and sports gear were strewn across the floor, posters ripped off the walls. In another, likely Danielle's bedroom, the wardrobe had been emptied onto the bed, nightstand drawers pulled open. What had happened here? Who had ransacked the house? And most of all, where were Danielle and Mason? Back downstairs, I checked the kitchen. It wasn't as wrecked as the rest of the house, but it wasn't untouched either. On the table sat 2 cups of tea, half-finished. That meant they had been here when the break-in had happened. Maybe they heard something, tried to hide. But where? And why hadn't Danielle answered my calls? I stepped out onto the back porch. From here, the garden stretched out to a small forest beyond. Maybe they'd run that way, hidden among the trees. Danielle. I shouted. Mason. It's me, Sharon. Are you here? Only the rustle of leaves and bird song answered. It seemed no one was around. But where could they have gone? They had no car, and the nearest town was miles away. I went back inside, the unease in my chest growing heavier. Something had clearly happened here. Something bad. But what exactly? And how was it tied to Brandon and all his secrets? As I scanned the living room, something shiny caught my eye under a toppled chair. I bent down and picked it up. A phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. I pressed the button, and the lock screen lit up. Danielle and Mason smiling in the photo. It was her phone, the same one she'd used to send me that morning message. That meant she'd been here when she wrote it. And judging by what I was seeing now, something must have happened right after. Something that made her drop her phone and run, or something that forced her to. A chill ran down my spine. What if Danielle and Mason hadn't just disappeared? What if they'd been taken? What if all of Brandon's warnings about danger weren't paranoia, but real? But who would take them? And why? Was it connected to Brandon's secret life, or to the fact that Danielle and I had just met yesterday? Could someone have been watching us, listening in, and decided to act? I didn't know what to do. Call the police and say what? That my husband's other wife and son vanished after we discovered he was living a double life? It sounded insane. Instead, I decided to search the house again, hoping for some kind of clue, some hint about what had happened. In what looked like Brandon's study, the chaos was the same. Drawers ripped out, papers scattered, books knocked from shelves. I started going through the mess. Most of it was ordinary. Bills, receipts, old letters, nothing useful. Then, tucked inside a book on the floor, I found a folded piece of paper, handwritten. The handwriting was Brandon's. I knew it instantly. Danielle, if you're reading this, it means my fears were right. They found out about you and Mason. Don't try to contact me. Don't stay at home. It's not safe. Go to Albany, to my Aunt Jordan. You know the address. You'll be safe there, at least for a while. And don't tell anyone about Jessica. No one. Do you hear me? This is life and death. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. Brandon had warned Danielle that they knew about her and Mason. He told her to go to Albany to some Aunt Jordan and not to tell anyone about someone named Jessica. Jessica? Another woman? Another secret? And who were they? The people he claimed were a threat. Was this connected to his double life? To whatever shady business he was involved in? The questions kept piling up. But one thing became clear. Danielle must have found this note and followed his instructions. She and Mason had probably left for Albany. That was why she hadn't answered my calls or texts. She was on the run. But what was I supposed to do? Go to Albany and track down this mysterious Aunt Jordan? Go back home? Lock myself inside and wait for Brandon to return? Or call the police and let them handle it? I didn't get the chance to decide. Outside, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A car. I peeked through the window and froze. A black SUV had stopped at the gate. 2 men stepped out, dressed in dark suits. They looked exactly like government agents from a movie. My heart dropped. Who were they? What did they want? Were they connected to Danielle's disappearance? And most terrifying of all, did they pose a danger to me? I wasn't about to find out. Shoving Brandon's note into my pocket, I slipped out the back door and ran into the woods. If those men were dangerous, I needed distance. I ran through the trees, trying to stay quiet, not leave a trail. Voices carried from behind me. They'd gone inside, realized the house was empty, and were now searching the property. I pushed myself farther, faster. I don't know how long I ran, maybe an hour, maybe more, before I finally collapsed by a small stream. I listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. Either they hadn't seen me escape, or they didn't think I was worth chasing. Sitting on a fallen log, I tried to catch my breath and gather my thoughts. What was happening? Who were those men? Why had Brandon warned Danielle about danger? And most importantly, what was I supposed to do now? First, I needed to get out of the woods and back to civilization. Then decide. Albany to find Danielle, home to confront Brandon, or the police. I pulled out my phone to check for service and froze. A notification glowed on the screen. A missed call from Brandon. He'd called just 10 minutes earlier while I was deep in the woods, without signal. My hands shook as I hit redial. Ring, ring, ring. I was about to give up when his voice came through. So familiar, yet suddenly so alien. Sharon, where are you? His voice was tight, anxious. I didn't know what to say. Should I tell the truth? Pretend I knew nothing? In the woods, I finally answered. Near the country house. The one your wife Danielle owns. The one you forgot to mention in the 6 years we've been married. Silence on the other end. Then Brandon's voice, low and resigned. You know. Not a question, but a statement. He knew his secret was out. Yes, Brandon, I know, I said firmly. I know you've been married to another woman for 16 years. I know you have a teenage son. I know our entire life together has been a lie. Not all of it, he protested. Not all of it, Sharon. I do love you. That part was never a lie. I let out a bitter laugh. Love? And that's why you lied to me for years. Lived a double life? Cheated with a woman who thought she was your only wife? If that's your version of love, I don't even want to know what hate looks like. Brandon sighed. It's more complicated than you think, Sharon. Much more. But right now isn't the time for explanations. You're in danger. Both of you are. Danielle and Mason are already gone. You need to leave, too. Immediately. A chill ran down my spine. Danger? From who? From the people looking for me, he said. I can't explain now. Just listen to me, for God's sake. Get out of the Hamptons, go home, pack only what you need, and head to Albany, Pine Street, number 247. Ask for Jordan Shearer. Tell her I sent you. She'll help. But I started, but he cut me off. No buts, Sharon. This is life and death. Your life and death. Do exactly as I say and be careful. Someone could be watching you. And then he hung up, leaving me in complete turmoil. What was going on? Who were these people chasing him? Why did he think I was in danger? And why should I believe him after everything I'd discovered? Still, his voice had sounded so desperate, so genuinely afraid, and those two men at Danielle's house had definitely looked suspicious. What if he was telling the truth? What if the danger was real? I decided not to risk it. I made my way out of the woods, found a road that led to the nearest village, and hitched a ride back to the Hamptons. From there, I caught the first bus home. The entire ride, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Who was Brandon really? Why were people after him? And just how much danger were Danielle, Mason, and I in? When I finally got home, the first thing I did was check the apartment. Everything was exactly how I'd left it. The mess in the bedroom from the broken cactus pot, the computer still on in the living room, the dirty cup in the kitchen. No signs of anyone breaking in. I walked to the bookshelf where the little box sat, the one I'd found in the cactus pot. I picked it up and studied it carefully. Just a small, rusty metal box with a keyhole. Nothing unusual. But Danielle had suggested it might have a false bottom. What if she was right? What if the documents Brandon mentioned in his videos were hidden inside? I turned it over and began tapping the base, listening for differences in sound. And sure enough, one spot sounded hollow, like something was underneath the metal. Looking closer, I spotted a tiny, almost invisible button near the edge. I pressed it, and part of the bottom slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and saw handwriting, but not Brandon's. Coordinates: 42.36 degrees north, 74.12 degrees west key in the cavity of the third molar upper right. Documents encrypted. Key: birthday B+L in alphabetical order. Account access code: first 5 digits after the decimal of pi plus year of meeting. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. Coordinates, a key hidden in a tooth, encrypted documents. It all sounded like something out of a spy thriller, not the life of a man who claimed to be a supply manager. But Brandon, I now knew, was no ordinary manager. He had multiple passports, lived a double life, and kept warning about danger. Who was he really? A spy? A criminal? Someone on the run from the law or from dangerous people? I decided to check the coordinates. I typed them into an online map. 42.36 degrees north, 74.12 degrees west. The location popped up in New York State, far from any town. Just woods and open fields. What could possibly be hidden there? And how did it tie into Brandon's secrets? The rest of the note was even stranger. A key hidden in the third molar upper right. Whose tooth? Brandon's, the author's? And what encrypted documents? Were they on the same flash drive I'd found in the cactus pot? And how to crack the code? Birthday B+L in alphabetical order. B was probably Brandon. But who was L? Then the account code. First 5 digits after the decimal of pi plus year of meeting. I remembered pi from school. 3.14159. So the digits would be 14,159. And the year we met? 2016. That would make the code 141592016. But what account? Brandon and I had a joint bank account, but I knew the access code for that one, and it was nothing like this. So was there another account? One I never knew about? The questions only grew, but the answers didn't. And time was slipping away. Brandon had said I was in danger. I didn't know if I could trust him anymore, but his fear had sounded real. And those men in suits? They had looked real enough. I decided to follow Brandon's advice and head to Albany, to this mysterious Aunt Jordan. Maybe I'd find Danielle and Mason there. Maybe I'd finally learn the truth about Brandon and his secrets. Or maybe it really would be a safe place, far away from whoever might be hunting me. I quickly packed the essentials into a small bag and looked around the apartment one last time. 6 years in these walls. 6 years built on lies. The thought was painful, but the uncertainty hurt even more. What was waiting for me? Would I ever see this home again? And would I ever see Brandon? I locked the door and went downstairs. The street was quiet, nothing out of the ordinary. But after Brandon's warning, suspicion crept into everything. It felt like eyes followed me from every corner, like every passing car was watching me. At the bus station, I bought a ticket for the next bus to Albany. While waiting to board, I kept scanning the crowd on edge, but nobody paid me any attention, just regular passengers rushing about their own lives. The bus arrived on time, and I settled into a window seat. When it pulled away, I finally let myself breathe. Whatever waited in Albany, at least I was moving, not sitting at home, waiting for some unknown threat to find me. Outside, the view shifted from city streets to suburbs, then to fields, forests, and small towns. A peaceful landscape, so different from the chaos inside me. My mind kept circling back to Brandon, to his double life, to his secrets. Who was he, really? Why did he live such a split existence? And most of all, had he ever truly loved me? Or was I just another piece in some elaborate game? I searched my memories, looking for signs I might have missed. Did he ever slip up? Did the mask ever crack, revealing his real self? Nothing stood out. Brandon had always been attentive, caring. Yes, there were the frequent business trips, the strange phone calls, the unexplained absences. But I had brushed it all off as work stress, as part of his job. Never once had I suspected an entire second life hiding behind those small oddities. How had he managed it for so many years? Balancing time between two families, keeping track of stories, remembering what he'd told each of us. It required insane organization, almost an actor's skill, or maybe a pathological gift for lying. The bus pulled into Albany 3 hours later. I got off at the station and headed straight for the taxi stand. I gave the driver the address. Pine Street, 247. The ride took about 20 minutes. The car stopped in front of a small, one-story house with a neat garden. Nothing special, just an ordinary home in a quiet neighborhood of a provincial city. Who lived here? Was she really Brandon's aunt? And if so, how much did she know about his double life? I paid the driver, grabbed my bag, and walked up to the gate. Doubts swept over me. What would I say to the woman inside? How would I explain showing up at her door? But I didn't have a choice. I opened the gate, walked up the path, and rang the bell. It took several long seconds before the door opened. An elderly woman, maybe 70, stood there, a kind, lined face but sharp, watchful eyes. "Hello," I said. "Are you Jordan Shearer?" She nodded, studying me carefully. "Yes, that's me." "And you are?" "My name is Sharon," I replied. Sharon Muse. "I'm here from Brandon." At his name, her expression shifted, a flicker of worry, suspicion. "Come in," she said quickly, stepping aside. "Don't stand out there." I walked in, and Jordan immediately locked the door behind me. Not one lock, but 3. Strange, I thought, for such a quiet little town. "Follow me," she said, leading me through a small entryway into the living room. The room was cozy, clean, filled with furniture that looked decades old. A couch with a knitted throw, a china cabinet, a TV on a stand, shelves lined with books. Everything spoke of a calm, steady life. Nothing hinted at secrets or danger. But my eyes weren't on the furniture. They were on the people sitting on the couch. Danielle and Mason, alive, safe. "Sharon." Danielle jumped to her feet. "Thank God you're here, too. We were so worried." She rushed over and hugged me tightly, like we were old friends instead of women who'd only just met. Mason, tall and skinny, with Brandon's features written all over his face, watched me with a mix of curiosity and caution. "You know each other?" Jordan asked, surprised, glancing from me to Danielle. "Yes," Danielle answered. "We met yesterday. Sharon, she's Brandon's wife. The other one." Jordan shook her head slowly. "Oh, Brandon, what have you done?" I sank into a chair, the tension of the past days finally starting to ease. At least Danielle and Mason were safe. And for the moment, so was I. Tell me what happened, I said, turning to Danielle. Who broke into the country house? Why did you run? Danielle sat down beside me and began to talk. After our meeting at the cafe, I went back to the country house and told Mason the truth. Not everything, of course. I left out some details, but I explained that his father was living a double life, that he had another wife. Mason was shocked. He refused to believe it. We talked for a long time, trying to make sense of it all. And then late that night, I found that note in Brandon's study. He warned about danger, told us to come here to his aunt's place. I wasn't sure whether to believe him, but I didn't want to take chances. We were planning to leave in the morning, but we didn't make it. They came sooner. Who are they? I asked. 2 men in black suits, Danielle replied. They pulled up in a black SUV. I saw them from the bedroom window and knew right away they weren't coming with good intentions. Mason and I slipped out the back door and hid in the neighbor's shed. We watched them break down the door and go inside. They tore the place apart, searching for something. Then they left. We waited until dark and then walked to the nearest town. From there, we hitchhiked to Albany. I had Jordan's address. Brandon mentioned her once. They didn't follow you? I asked. I don't think so. We were careful. I threw away my phone so he couldn't be tracked. Bought a new one here in Albany to send you that message. I don't even know if you got it. I did, I nodded. That's why I went to the house, and I almost ran right into those same men. I told her about my trip to the Hamptons, hiding in the woods from the strangers in suits, and Brandon's call with his warning. So it's true, Danielle said slowly. We really are in danger. But why? What did Brandon do? And who are these people? All eyes turned to Jordan. If anyone could shed light on Brandon's secrets, it was her. The older woman sighed and got up from the couch. I'll make some tea, she said. This will be a long conversation. While she busied herself in the kitchen, Danielle and I exchanged updates. I told her about the note I found hidden in the box, the strange coordinates, the codes. What does any of it mean? Danielle asked, baffled. It sounds like a spy novel, not real life. Maybe that's exactly what it is, Jordan's voice answered as she returned, carrying a tray with teacups and a plate of cookies. Maybe Brandon really is tied to what you'd call espionage. She set the tray down and sat across from us. The truth is, I'm not Brandon's aunt, she said. I'm his handler. Or rather, I was, until he tried to walk away. Handler. I repeated. What do you mean? Brandon works for the intelligence services, Jordan explained. Or worked. He was a deep cover agent embedded in an international crime syndicate involved in weapons and drug trafficking. I almost laughed. Brandon, an intelligence agent? It sounded so ridiculous, so far-fetched. But Jordan's face was dead serious. This is some kind of joke. Danielle asked, clearly feeling the same disbelief I did. I'm afraid not, Jordan said, shaking her head. Brandon was recruited 15 years ago, back when he was still a student. He was sent into the organization under a false identity. Later, he had to build another one, and then another, as his circle of contacts expanded. But why marry? Danielle asked. Why start a family if he was undercover? It was part of his cover, Jordan said. A family man seems more trustworthy, and it gave him a kind of anchor in the real world. Deep cover agents often lose their sense of self. Family helped Brandon remember who he really was. And the second family? I asked. Why did he need me if he already had Danielle and Mason? Jordan gave me a look full of sympathy. That wasn't part of the plan. He met you during one of his missions. You were supposed to be just a source of information, but he fell in love. Truly in love for the first time in years. He wasn't supposed to marry you. That was against all the rules. But he couldn't resist. Her words stole my breath. Brandon really did love me. It wasn't an act. It wasn't part of the job. He actually felt something for me. If you were his handler, why did you let this happen? Danielle asked bitterly. Why didn't you stop him when he decided to start a second family? I tried, Jordan sighed. I warned him it was too dangerous, that he was putting himself, both women, and the child at risk. But he wouldn't listen. He insisted he could handle it, that he could protect everyone. And to be fair, he did, until recently. What changed? I asked. Jordan hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. 6 months ago, Brandon got intel on a major arms shipment. Not just weapons, chemical weapons, banned under international treaties. He passed the information up the chain, and a raid was set in motion. But something went wrong. The criminals got wind of it and escaped. They realized there was a mole in their ranks and started to purge. Brandon knew suspicion was closing in on him, and that it was only a matter of time before he was exposed. He decided to disappear, to fake his own death and start over with both of you. How? Danielle and I breathed out at the same time. He had a plan, Jordan continued. He prepared documents, money, new identities for you and the boy. He intended to speak to each of you, explain everything, and then bring you together. He hoped you could, if not be friends, at least coexist peacefully for the sake of safety. But he didn't make it. They found him sooner than he expected. And what about him now? Danielle asked, her voice trembling. Jordan spread her hands. I don't know. He reached out 3 days ago, said he had to go underground, that he'd contact me when it was safe. Since then, nothing. The room sank into heavy silence. Each of us was trying to process what we just heard. Brandon wasn't just a man living a double life. He was an undercover agent. It explained so much. The constant trips, the secretive phone calls, the silence about his job. But accepting it was another matter entirely. So what do we do now? Mason asked, breaking his silence. Are we in danger? Jordan nodded. I'm afraid so. If the criminals are after Brandon, they could come for you, too. To use you as leverage, or simply for revenge. So what? We just hide for the rest of our lives. Danielle asked bitterly. Not forever. Jordan shook her head. Brandon left you a way out. Sharon, you mentioned a note with coordinates and codes. I nodded and pulled the folded paper from my pocket, the one I'd found hidden inside the box. Here, read it yourself. Jordan took the note, studied it carefully and nodded. Just as I thought. This is directions to a safe stash, money and documents Brandon prepared for you. The coordinates point to a spot in New York State, likely a cache with documents or keys. The mention of the molar. That's about Brandon. He really does have a hollow tooth with a microchip in it. That chip holds the encryption key to access a secure server with files. And the account code? It's for a bank account. That's where the money is, meant for your new lives. But how does that help us? I asked. Brandon's gone, and the chip is with him. How are we supposed to access anything? Jordan frowned and thought. He was cautious. There's probably a backup key. I bet it's hidden in the cache at those coordinates. So, we have to go there, Danielle clarified. I'm afraid so, Jordan said. But it's risky. You might be watched. I thought of the men in black suits, tearing through Danielle's country house. Were they criminals hunting Brandon, or government agents, his own colleagues, trying to find him or protect his family? Can't you help us? I asked Jordan. If you were his handler, don't you have resources, contacts? The older woman shook her head. I retired 3 years ago. Officially, I have nothing to do with Brandon's operation anymore. I can give advice, offer you temporary shelter, but that's all. And to complicate matters, Brandon went rogue in recent months. He didn't always tell his superiors what he was doing. I don't even know who we can trust now. So we're on our own, Danielle summed up. No one's coming to save us. Silence fell again, each of us trapped in our thoughts. The danger was real. Brandon was missing, and our only lead was a hidden cache somewhere in the woods of New York State. I think we should go to those coordinates, I finally said. What do we have to lose? If there really is something there to help us start over, the risk is worth it. Danielle nodded. I agree. But how do we even get there? We don't have a car. Public transport won't take us into the middle of the forest. I have a car, Jordan offered. It's old, but it runs. I'll lend it to you, but you should leave at night. Less chance of being noticed. We worked out the details. We'd leave at midnight when the roads would be empty. Jordan gave us a paper map of New York State, marking the spot that matched the coordinates. Sure enough, it was in the woods, far from any town. How would we find the cache? What if the coordinates weren't precise enough, and we ended up combing through acres of forest? But there was no other choice. It was our only hope. We spent the rest of the day at Jordan's house, preparing for the trip. She packed us warm clothes, flashlights, food, and water. We studied the map, planning the safest route. And the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about Brandon. Where was he now? Was he even alive? And would I ever see him again? By 11 that night, we were ready. Jordan led us out the back door to the garage where an old Honda Civic was waiting. Full tank, she said, handing the keys to Danielle. Papers are in the glove compartment. Good luck and be careful. The three of us, Danielle, Mason, and I, got into the car. As we pulled out of the driveway, Danielle switched off the headlights and drove using only the parking lights until we were clear of the city. Only once we hit the highway did she turn on the low beams, and the car cut into the night. The first hour passed in silence. Each of us was lost in thought. I stared out the window at the blur of trees and kept thinking how wildly life could change in just a couple of days. On Saturday morning, I was just an ordinary woman with ordinary joys and problems. Now here I was, driving through the night with my husband's wife and son, hiding from unknown pursuers, searching for a hidden cache of documents that might give us a new life. If someone had told me this story, I would have laughed it off as the plot of a cheap thriller. But this was real. My life had turned into a nightmare drama. How did you meet Brandon? Mason suddenly asked, breaking the silence. I turned toward him. The teenager was curled up in the back seat, arms wrapped around his knees, and in the dim glow from the dashboard, his face looked older, more serious. We met at a modern art exhibition, I said after a pause. I was there with a friend, and he said he was there for work, that his company was sponsoring the event. We started talking in front of one of the installations. He was attentive, funny, genuinely interested in what I thought. At the end of the night, he asked for my number. A couple of days later, he called and invited me to dinner. And you never suspected he already had a family? Mason's voice held no accusation, just curiosity. Of course not, I shook my head. He never gave me a reason to doubt him. He was attentive, caring. Sure, there were little things that seemed suspicious now. Frequent business trips, odd phone calls. But back then I chalked it up to his job to stress. I had no idea his real job was espionage. Same, Mason said quietly. Mom and I didn't know either. We thought he was just a logistics manager. He was good at keeping secrets. No kidding, Danielle muttered, her eyes fixed on the road, at building a life out of lies. Her voice was bitter, and I couldn't blame her. Both of us had been fooled by the same man, someone we trusted, someone we loved. And while Jordan had called his lies necessary, noble, that didn't make them any easier to swallow. Do you still love him? Danielle suddenly asked, glancing at me quickly. I hesitated. Did I still love Brandon after everything I'd learned? After everything he'd done? I don't know, I admitted. I'm not even sure I ever really knew the real Brandon, the man behind all the masks. But I love the Brandon I thought I knew. And I guess part of me still loves him. What about you? Danielle stayed quiet for a long time, eyes locked on the road. I lived with him for 16 years, she said finally. I gave him a son. We shared everything, joys, struggles. And all that time he was lying to me. Not about small things, about everything. His life, his work, who he really was. I could have forgiven an affair, but this, he hid his entire existence from me. How do you love someone you never really knew? Silence fell again, broken only by the hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. The three of us drove through the night, bound together by one man and his secrets. 3 lives turned upside down, all because of a broken cactus pot. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, we turned off the main highway onto a dirt road. Danielle's phone GPS showed we were about 15 miles from the coordinates. The road grew worse by the minute. Asphalt gave way to gravel, then to rutted earth. The car jolted over potholes, headlights cutting through trees and brush. I worried we'd get stuck out here in the middle of nowhere, with no signal, no help. But Danielle drove steadily, like she'd been down roads like this before. Maybe she had. Maybe she and Brandon and Mason had taken family trips to the woods. While with me, Brandon always preferred the city. Finally, the GPS announced we'd arrived. Danielle killed the engine, and the sudden silence made the sounds of the night forest almost deafening. Leaves rustled, an owl hooted. Something cracked in the distance. We stepped out and looked around. Just woods. Ordinary, endless woods. No markers, no signs of a cache. Just trees, brush, and a dirt track fading into darkness. So now what? Mason asked, sweeping a flashlight beam across the trees. How are we supposed to find anything? Good question. The coordinates had brought us here, but what next? There had to be some kind of clue. I pulled out the note and read it again. Coordinates: 42.36 degrees north, 74.12 degrees west. Key in the cavity of the third molar, upper right. Documents encrypted. Key: birthday B+L in alphabetical order. Account access code: first 5 digits after the decimal of pi plus year of meeting. Nothing in it pointed directly to where we should look. Except maybe the third molar upper right, I said slowly. What if it isn't just about Brandon's tooth? What if it's also a hint? The third molar, the third tooth upper right? I glanced to the right, then up. Nothing but trees and stars. Maybe it's about a specific tree, Danielle suggested, sweeping her beam along the trunks nearby. But how do we know which one? There are hundreds. We started scanning the trees to the right of the road. Oaks, birches, maples. Nothing unusual, no carvings, no marks, no signs. Maybe we're looking at it wrong, Mason said. Maybe it means something else. I read the note again. Third, right upper. What if it's not about teeth at all, I murmured. What if it's directions? Suddenly it hit me. Third, could it mean the third tree on the right side of the road? And upper. Maybe the hiding place was up in the tree. We started counting the trees on the right. First, second, third. It was a huge oak with a wide crown. We aimed our flashlights upward, scanning the branches. And there it was, a hollow about 10 feet up in the trunk. That's it. Danielle exclaimed. That has to be the cache. But how do we get to it? The hollow was far too high to reach from the ground, and the lower branches started even higher. I can try climbing, Mason offered. I do rock climbing. I can handle it. Danielle looked worried, but after a moment nodded. Okay, but be careful. If it feels unsafe, stop immediately. We'll figure something else out. Mason shrugged off his jacket and started climbing. His hands and feet found holds in the rough bark, steady and confident. Danielle and I kept our flashlights trained on him, watching nervously as he made his way up. Finally, he reached the hollow. There's something here, he called down. Some kind of container. He pulled out a small metal cylinder, like a capsule, and began the careful descent. A few minutes later, he was back on the ground, handing it to us. The container was tightly sealed with a threaded cap. I tried twisting it open, but it wouldn't budge. Looks like it's glued shut, I noted, examining the seam. Or maybe soldered. Then we'll have to break it open, Danielle decided. But not here. Let's go back to the car. We got inside, switched on the dome light, and steadied the container. The smooth metal had no labels or markings. Only the cap, had a small raised bump, like a button. Maybe you press it, Mason suggested. I carefully pushed the bump. There was a faint click and the cap loosened. I unscrewed it and peered inside. The cylinder held several items. A flash drive, a small sealed pouch with what looked like a microchip inside, 3 passports, and a folded sheet of paper. I pulled out the passports and opened them. They were issued under the names Sharon O'Donnell, Danielle O'Donnell, and Mason O'Donnell. The birth dates matched ours, but the last names were different. Each passport had a photo. How Brandon had gotten mine, I had no idea. "These are our new identities," Danielle whispered, staring at her passport. "For a new life." I unfolded the sheet of paper. It was a letter written in Brandon's handwriting. "My dear ones, if you're reading this, it means you found each other and the cash. I hope that I'll be able to explain everything myself, but it seems fate decided otherwise. I know you must hate me right now for the lies, the double life, all the secrets I kept from you. I won't ask for forgiveness. What I did is unforgivable. But I want you to know I loved you both. Differently at different times, but truly and deeply. Danielle, you are my first real love, the mother of my son, my anchor in the hardest times. You gave me a family when I needed it most. Sharon, you came into my life later, when I didn't believe I could feel that way again. You brought light and warmth back into my world. You reminded me of who I really am. I know I've hurt you and I can't change that, but I can at least try to keep you safe. In this container, you'll find everything you need to start over. Passports, a flash drive with instructions, a microchip with encryption key to a server containing additional documents, a bank account code in a Swiss bank, first 5 digits of pi 3.14159, so 14159, plus the year I met Danielle, 2007. There's enough money there for you to begin a new life anywhere in the world. I don't know if we'll ever see each other again. If I make it out of this, I'll find you. If not, know that you were the best part of my life. Take care of each other. Brandon." I finished reading and looked up. Danielle was silently crying, her face in her hands. Mason held her shoulders, his own eyes wet. My throat tightened, too. Brandon had loved us both, in different ways, but genuinely. And now maybe he was in danger. Maybe he was already gone, trying to protect us. What do we do now? Mason asked once the 3 of us had calmed down a little. I looked at the passports, the flash drive, the letter. "We do what he wanted," I said. "We start a new life. Together." Danielle lifted her tear-streaked face toward me. "Together? Are you really ready to live with us?" After everything that's happened, I didn't know if I was ready to live with the woman who had also been my husband's wife, with the child he'd never mentioned to me. It was strange, almost unimaginable, something I couldn't have pictured even a week ago. But we had no choice. We were bound together by Brandon, by his secrets, by his love, by his desperate attempts to keep us safe. And maybe the only way we could survive this new dangerous reality was by staying together. Yes, I nodded. Together. At least until we know the danger is gone. Danielle wiped her tears and gave me a faint smile. "All right, together it is. After all, we're family now. A strange, unusual family, but still a family." We decided not to go back to Albany, but to head straight for the airport. On the way, we stopped at a 24-hour gas station with a small store and bought new clothes to change our looks. Danielle cut off her long hair. I dyed mine from brunette to blonde. And Mason put on thick-rimmed glasses that completely altered his appearance. At the airport, we used our new passports to buy tickets for the next flight to Zurich. Switzerland seemed like the logical choice since that's where the bank account was. While we waited to board, I kept thinking how unreal it all felt. Just a few days ago, I was an ordinary woman with an ordinary life. And now here I was in an airport with my husband's wife and son, carrying a new passport, a new look, and preparing to fly to another country to start over. All because of one broken cactus pot. One careless step, one small accident, and everything had changed. Looking at Danielle and Mason sitting beside me, I knew they were thinking the same thing. about Brandon, about his secrets, his love, his sacrifice for our safety, and about whether we'd ever see him again. Our flight was called. We gathered our few belongings and headed to the gate. Ahead of us was only uncertainty, a new life in a foreign country, maybe always looking over our shoulders. But we were together, 3 people tied by one man and his secrets, 3 lives overturned because of a broken cactus pot. And maybe that bond was the very thing that would keep us alive in this new reality. And Brandon, if he could, he would find us. I believed that. I believed his love for us would carry him through whatever he was facing, and maybe one day we would be together again. Not as a traditional family, of course, as something new, strange, different, but together. As I went through security, I turned one last time, half expecting to see Brandon rushing toward us. But there were only strangers, hurrying along their own paths. It was time to let go of the past and move forward. We boarded the plane, and minutes later it lifted off the ground, carrying us toward a new life. A life born from a broken cactus pot. A life full of uncertainty and danger, but also new chances. A life we would build together, day by day, step by step. And who knows, maybe one day in our new home, I'd see a cactus in a clay pot on the windowsill. And maybe beside it would stand Brandon, smiling his familiar, slightly sad smile. Because in life, anything is possible. I had already learned that. When I finished my story, my mother was speechless. She never imagined that my simple tale about a broken cactus would lead into such an incredible narrative. A story about how one careless step can completely change your life and everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. She sat silently for a long time, processing what she'd heard. Then she asked just one question. Was it all true? Was Brandon really an undercover agent? Did you and Danielle and Mason really start a new life in Switzerland? I smiled and told her that some stories are better left unanswered. Let everyone decide for themselves whether to believe them or not. But one thing I know for certain, you can never be sure you truly know someone, not even the people closest to you. Everyone has secrets, hidden lives others can only guess at. And sometimes it takes just one random event, a broken cactus pot, a chance meeting, an overheard conversation, for those secrets to come spilling out and change your life forever. It's been 5 years now. 5 years of a new life, new discoveries, new relationships. And every day I wake up amazed at how unpredictable life can be. How one small moment can set off a chain of changes that ripple through your world and the lives of those around you. And every day I'm grateful. Grateful that I found the strength to face the truth, no matter how bitter, and to move forward. Grateful that I've built a new family, strange, unconventional, but full of love and support. And Brandon, sometimes he comes to me in dreams. He smiles that familiar smile and tells me everything will be all right. He's proud of us. He loves us all, each in his own way. And I believe him. I believe that wherever he is, whatever happened to him, that love remains, as does ours for him. Maybe one day he'll come back, or maybe we'll finally learn what became of him. But until then, we live day by day, step by step, building our new life, creating new memories and new reality. And on the windowsill in our living room sits a cactus in a clay pot, a reminder of how it all began, and of how the biggest changes in life can sometimes start with the smallest, most ordinary things. Who would have thought that a broken cactus pot could change everything?